You've probably heard that depression is a chemical imbalance, that your brain runs low on serotonin, that antidepressants top it back up, like refilling a tank, and that's why people feel better. It's a clean explanation, easy to remember, widely repeated. It's also not quite right. Not because antidepressants don't work. For many people, they genuinely do. But because the story of why they work is far more interesting than the one most people have been told. And understanding the real story changes something. It changes how you think about depression itself. It changes how you think about the people who take these medications. And if you've ever taken one, or considered it, it might change how you think about yourself. Because here's what nobody explains. Antidepressants don't fill up your serotonin like a tank. What they actually do is far stranger, and in a way, far more remarkable. They create the conditions for your brain to rebuild itself. And the fact that this takes weeks, the fact that you don't feel different the first day or the first week, that's not a sign that they're not working. That's the rebuilding happening. The chemical imbalance theory is simple and satisfying. Depression equals low serotonin. Antidepressants raise serotonin. Problem addressed. It gave millions of people a way to understand their experience, not as a character flaw or a weakness, but as a biological condition, a medical issue like low iron or high blood pressure. And that framing genuinely helped. For a lot of people, understanding that something physical was happening made it easier to seek help. But the theory has a problem. If depression were simply low serotonin and SSRIs simply raise serotonin levels, which they do within hours, then you'd expect to feel better within hours. But you don't. Most people taking SSRIs don't notice any shift for 2 to 4 weeks, sometimes 6. The serotonin changes happen fast. The mood changes happen slowly. If it were a simple tank-filling operation, that gap wouldn't exist. So what is actually happening in those weeks? That's what the science has been slowly figuring out, and the answer is much more interesting than a tank being refilled. To understand what antidepressants actually do, we need to start with how serotonin works in the first place. Serotonin is a chemical messenger. It carries signals between brain cells. Think of it as a conversation happening across a tiny gap between two neurons. Neuron A releases serotonin. It crosses the gap. Neuron B receives it. The message is delivered. But here's what happens next. The serotonin doesn't stay there. The sending neuron, neuron A, has a system that pulls the serotonin back in after the message is sent. This is called reuptake. Think of it as the conversation ending. The words pulled back before they could fully land. In people experiencing depression, this reuptake happens too efficiently. The serotonin is pulled back before neuron B has fully received the signal. The conversation keeps getting cut short. The message keeps not quite landing. And this is exactly what SSRIs do. SSRI stands for Selective Serotonin Reuptake Inhibitor, which means a medication that inhibits, slows down the reuptake process. The serotonin stays in the gap longer. Neuron B has more time to receive the signal. The conversation completes. But, and this is the part that changes everything, more serotonin in the gap doesn't directly equal feeling better. If it did, you'd feel it on day one. What more serotonin does is create the conditions for something else to happen. The second mechanism is neuroplasticity. Think of neuroplasticity as your brain's ability to change, to form new connections, rewire existing pathways, adapt to new circumstances. This is how you learn things, how you recover from difficult experiences, how patterns of thought can actually shift over time. Here's what the research has found. Serotonin is one of the key enablers of neuroplasticity. When serotonin is running low, when those conversations between neurons keep getting cut short, the brain's ability to form new connections is reduced. not eliminated, but reduced. The brain becomes less flexible, more fixed in its existing patterns. And in depression, those existing patterns are often exactly the problem. When SSRIs increase the available serotonin, when those conversations start completing properly, neuroplasticity increases. The brain becomes more capable of change, more capable of forming new connections, rewiring old patterns, shifting out of the grooves that depression has worn deep. This is why it takes weeks. You're not waiting for a tank to fill. You're waiting for your brain to actually rebuild connections, to wire itself differently, to create new pathways that weren't there before. And that takes time, because building anything real always takes time. And the third piece is perhaps the most important. The neuroplasticity that SSRIs enable isn't automatic. A more flexible brain isn't the same as a better functioning brain. The flexibility is the potential. What you do with the potential is what creates the shift. This is why therapy alongside medication consistently produces better outcomes than medication alone. Not because the therapy adds more serotonin, because the therapy gives the newly flexible brain something to do. New ways of thinking to practice, new patterns to wire in, new connections to build. The medication opens the window. What you put through the window is up to you. So here's what this means. Whether you take antidepressants, are considering them, or are simply trying to understand someone who does. The weeks when an SSRI is building in your system, the weeks when you're waiting to feel different, those weeks are not wasted time. They are the window. Your brain is becoming more plastic during those weeks, more capable of forming new connections, more capable of change, even if you can't feel it yet. And what you do during that window matters. New experiences during that period have more impact than they would otherwise. Therapy during that period lands differently. The new ways of thinking you practice have a more receptive brain to wire themselves into. Movement, connection, small moments of engagement, all of these feed the neuroplasticity that the medication is enabling. The tip is this. If you're in those early weeks or supporting someone who is, don't just wait for the medication to work. Treat those weeks as the window they actually are. Do one new thing. Have one real conversation. Take one walk somewhere different. Not because it will speed up the serotonin, because your brain is in its most flexible state, and everything you give it right now has a better chance of sticking. The medication creates the conditions. You build what goes inside them. Let's come back to the beginning. Depression isn't just low serotonin, and antidepressants aren't just refilling a tank. What's actually happening is more complex and more hopeful than that. Serotonin signals are getting cut short before they land. SSRIs slow that process down, letting the signals complete. And with more complete signals, the brain becomes more flexible, more capable of the kind of change that depression had been making harder. The weeks of waiting aren't the medication failing to work. They're the brain doing the hardest thing a brain can do, rebuilding. And here is what I think matters most about understanding this. Taking medication for your brain is not different from taking medication for any other organ. Your heart can need support. Your thyroid can need support. Your brain, the most complex organ in the known universe, running on chemistry as intricate as anything in biology, can need support too. That's not weakness. That's maintenance. Your brain isn't broken. It's doing something extraordinarily difficult. And sometimes it needs the right conditions to do it. And the fact that you're trying to understand it, that you're curious about what's happening inside you, that's the brain already doing what it does best, trying to find its way through. That's built human, a new behavior decoded every week. See you next time.